Hey, good morning to you, and welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast. I appreciate you joining us today. As you can see, I have a special guest with me around the table, and I appreciate Brother David Young being with us. I want to start by saying, again, thank all of you who faithfully watch and or listen to the podcast each and every week. We are astounded at what God's doing with this little platform that He has given us to serve the Lord in. And we try to cover a vast array of topics that are of interest to you, everything from texts in the Word of God to doctrinal issues to hot topic issues of the day. And today I've asked Brother David to come along and to help us with a particular topic that I think will be of value to you and will help preachers who have children that they're rearing for the glory of God. And we want to talk about that today. But let me get the pleasantries out of the way, if I may, Brother David. Good to have you. How are you doing?
Good morning. We're doing well. Glad to be here this morning.
I'm glad that you were able to come by. There was a local meeting that was going on at Brother Chad Watson's church, and you were going to have an opportunity of being by here anyway. I had your name on the board regarding this topic for a while.
That might not be good.
Well, it may not be, but we'll see here in just a handful of minutes.
Exactly.
And the beauty of this is, we're not live. We're recording this. So if you're awful, we can file 13.
Edit it right out.
Yeah, we'll be done with that in a hurry. But I know that you have a face for radio.
Exactly. Not podcast.
But it really is a joy to have you here. And you and I have been friends a long time. I don't even know how long we've been acquainted. And
a long time.
A long time. And our dads, of course, are great old men of God that the vast majority of folks don't know, but they're just good, solid, steady men of character and integrity.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things that has drawn us together. Not that we talk every day, but we're friends, and has to do, really, our friendship is based on some things that our daddy put in us, which is integrity and character and work ethic, which is some of the things we want to talk about today.
Yep.
How
exactly.
are you doing?
We are doing well, trying to stay busy, and the Lord has been blessing us, and we're doing really good, and looking forward to the meeting that we come for at Brother Watson's, and
right.
God's really been helping our young people, and it's a big deal. And one of the parts of this conversation, personally, I believe, has to do with what God is actually doing
Amen.
In our young people now. Amen. Here at our church. So
now you were reared in Georgia. Tell us where you were reared in Georgia.
Dad moved from Tabernacle in Greenville in late 77, early 78. We took Antioch in Harlem, Georgia. And I lived in a little town called Deering, which was within 4 miles.
Right.
Matter of fact, I still live right across the road from Dad, where I grew up basically my entire life. And so we came there, and so I've been there. Of course, Dad pastored there for 33 years, and I have I'm going into my 11th year myself. So we've been there almost 44 years. We're the oldest of members at Antioch. My dad is. There's nobody that has been there longer than our family has at that church.
So you've been pastoring, you followed your dad, but
Exactly.
you've been pastoring Antioch for 11 years?
Yes, sir.
Are you serious? I didn't realize that it had been
11 years in February.
Amazing.
So we're already moving.
In your 12th year?
Well, no, I'm going into my 11 will be in February.
I got you.
So I'm moving that way. So I'm almost halfway to there.
And your dad was there how many years?
33.
33. Wow.
So February 11, 2011, 11 is when the night that we transferred over, and so that's kind of how it's been. And it's amazing. Time it don't even seem like 10 years. It has just flown so fast.
Now, prior to you, now when were you called to preach? Let me start.
That was back in 94.
Okay.
I was called to preach in 94. Got saved in 1980. I was 6 years of age. Got saved. And then it was some years I was in my teenage years when God called me to preach. Let me back up. I was
Early
older.
adult.
Yeah, I was older. It was just a collage of things that happened, and God called me to preach. I was probably 20, 21, somewhere in that area.
Yeah. Were you already married when you were?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I was single when I got called to preach, and I was not even looking to preach. Because growing up, I had been. And this is a problem. This is a problem. Everybody had called me to preach, but God.
Right.
And I'm not sure that I would not have been called to preach years earlier if everybody could have left me alone to hear God's voice. So I was kind of, and when they all left me alone, and then that's when God called me.
So you didn't have an aversion to preaching. I mean, you didn't run.
No. Matter of fact, when God dealt with me, 2 weeks later, I surrendered. The only reason I didn't is because I was more fearful of myself. I wanted to make sure, because I sure didn't want to say this is what God wanted me to do in 2 years. I had to apologize to everybody, because that wasn't, which some people probably think I need to do that after they've heard me preach. But
the Lord called me to preach at 16, believe it or not. I mean, the call started, I started sensing it while I was here in Monroe, North Carolina, believe that or not, for a camp meeting at Bobby Leonard's church. And I was 16 and got advice, not from my dad, which I should have, but I got advice from another preacher who turned out to be, probably wasn't even saved, to be honest with you. And I just forgot about it. And it was from there until like my 24 when God finally called me to preach. And but it wasn't like I was running. It was just like, I'd gotten bad advice and was just going on,
Yeah.
And then God made it real, and
wow. Yeah, I didn't run from that part of it at all. God had dealt with me, and it's amazing we look back on it, and that's the reason I said I probably would have been called to preach earlier, but I didn't. I was so afraid because everybody was trying to call me to preach, and so when I'd get to a service, I led the singing, and I would be so burdened when I'd get in there, and you've known me long enough to know this. I'd get up to lead a singing, and I had been studying or whatever, and I'd turn to Dad and say, do you mind me saying something? And he, of course, Dad, he would never he ever stop it, because it was, and not being a smart or know-all, but it was right. It was not anything, but it was on me. And what I was doing is I was getting preach off of me, but I didn't know that's what that was at that time, and so it went on, and I became even to this day, I try to be very sensitive, even of testifying, because at that time, as a young man, it affected my church, and I could tell it. And again, I don't want to sound like something spiritual. It just, mystical. I knew it. Yeah, I knew that what was on me was just like a message, but it would only last a minute or 2 minutes. But I would blow the best part, that we preach 45 minutes to get to.
There's a lot of people that don't understand what you just said, but it takes an intimate walk with the Lord to get an understanding of that. And that doesn't mean God doesn't use you without having that real keen understanding of the voice of God, but it sure does help.
Oh, man, it's amazing. And then once I surrendered to preach, I recognized what I had been dealing with for 3 or 4 years previous to that time, because then it started gelling for me. Now,
you didn't immediately go to work with your dad. I mean, you were a business owner for a few years, and then eventually married Miss Stephanie, and the children started coming on. But then you started working with your dad in what year?
I went as a youth pastor to Mississippi for some time, and it was only about 9 months, and a lot of things happened in those 9 months, but God took me away from Antioch just for that little bit of time and brought me back, and I didn't understand. Took me some time to even get over that, but I learned later what happened. God took me away as David, Everybody knew me as David.
Right.
And because I grew up, all the people there were like my family. Right. And but when I came back, I was Brother David. And I think that God did that to let them recognize I can be gone. And not that I'm saying I'm special, but it was just something, it was a whole different atmosphere when I came back. And then when I came back, of course, I took over within a year or two. That would have been 2000. So within a year or so, I took over raising money for the printing ministry. At that time, the Antioch had fully funded the printing ministry with hardly any help whatsoever. Right. So that's what I did. And so we began to work together that way in the ministry. I did the road, which is what he does now, right. And he did the other. Right. So that's how and we just swapped roles when I started pastoring.
And then 11 years ago, you took the helm of the church.
Exactly.
Well, I'm amazed at how God's blessed it and what God's done there. It's just phenomenal. And how that the youth camp, and of course, that's special to me, youth camp there at Antioch has just exploded.
Yes.
And it's amazing what God's done.
Unbelievable,
it's
actually.
Amazing.
Just finished our 24th year in youth conference and youth camp there.
Now, one of the things that when folks talk to me about Christian families and about kids turning out right and families continuing to serve, not just nominally go to church, but serve in the ministry, and they ask about that, I always bring up the young family.
That's dangerous.
Well, I do, and I cannot tell you how much I respect your dad, Pastor Ron Young, and then your brother, Ronnie. I mean, there's not very men that I have as much confidence in as I do in your brother. And then just the whole family serving the Lord. How many siblings were there?
There's 5 of us.
Okay, so it was you and your brother Ronnie.
And Deborah and Ruth and Grace.
And all of them are in the ministry.
Yes.
And it wasn't something your dad pushed.
At all.
No,
none.
He didn't at all. He pushed hard work is what your dad pushed.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things we're going to talk about here momentarily. But now, all of you, each of you siblings, you have families. How many children do you have?
I have 9.
And Ronnie's got?
Ronnie's got 5. Deborah's got 3. Ruth's got 5 or 6, and Grace has got 5. Grace and Stacy have 5.
And y'all take family vacation together once a year.
In January, we take over Hilton Head when we go down there. I think there's 60-some odd of us.
Did you folk just hear that number? There are 60-some odd of us.
All of us are odd, but anyway.
Right, and you don't know all their names, but...
Yeah, I pray for them, and then I'll say, God, you know who they are, because you just...
to whom they belong.
Exactly.
Right?
We're living in this 21st century, and so making names up is the way that it goes today. Right. It's not, you don't have Jacobs and Joshuas anymore. Some weird. Yeah, exactly. That nobody else has.
Now, how many of the, you may not know this, I mean, you may have to think about it. How many of the grandchildren are in the ministry now?
As far as full-time, because you got to understand, Ronnie and Deborah are 10 years older than I am.
Right.
So their children are a lot older than ours are. Right. But you've got, as far as pastoring, Brother Ron's oldest boy, Preston.
Right.
Pastors, and then of course Brother Stacy's oldest daughter, they're going to the Philippines.
Right.
And then I'm trying
Ronnie's oldest daughter.
Yes, of course, Charity and Caleb are in Mississippi.
Pastoring.
Right. And then the other ones are serving at the church. I mean, as far as Jared is preaching. Then Deborah's kids are all, 2 of her boys are not married. They're still at home with them, working with them at Pleasant View. And then, of course, Rebecca's there, her and David Vires. So they're right there. And then you jump to our family is the next, because I'm the oldest of the 3 left. And Philip just got married, but no, as of now, God has not called any of my kids. But it's not it. it's never been a stressed issue. I do not stress that with my children whatsoever.
But to my knowledge, all of the children, all of your siblings are serving the Lord. And then, to my knowledge, most all of the grandchildren
are in church and
serving the Lord.
Most every one of them are key parts of wherever their church is at.
Right.
I mean, they're intricate parts in that ministry.
Right. Well, here's what I want to talk about today. As a pastor, and of course, my background was working prior to getting in the ministry. I know a lot of pastors' children, they don't know anything about work. I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion, but when it comes to physical, manual labor, all they've ever done was serve in some ministerial position that was basically office type work or ministerially driven, okay?
Exactly.
So what I want to talk about today is, I know that you've reared your boys to be workers, and I've reared my boys to be workers. And what I want to talk about is our responsibility to do that, how it transitions into ministry, and how that those children can be beneficial in helping us, not just physically in the ministry, which our families do, but monetarily in the ministry, and just administratively in the ministry. But what have you seen as your responsibility to get those boys ready for life?
Well, I guess I try to make it as short as I can. There's so many things. When my kids were small, I don't even know how many years now, maybe 14, 15 years ago, I began to realize that we needed to do something. And some of it I did consciously, some of it just kind of fell in place. But I realized that my kids needed to be wise. That God may never call them to preach.
Right.
They're going to be in the ministry, whatever they do. Of course, we're in it wide open. So what I did, and don't think that I have all the answers, because I do not. And I'm even to this day nervous, because what I have tried to do, honestly, I have not had somebody tell me this is what they did. I just felt like, with as many children as I had, I needed to do something to teach them how to work. And so we got into fooling with cows. That's how it started. And what I did, and again, I'm not saying this is the right way, this is what I did. I took my 4 oldest boys. What I had seen in business, when I read the scriptures, I find that the scripture talks about how basically the children of darkness are wiser in their money, and I've seen it. And myself, and I say this to my shame, my daddy screaming and kicking, I did a lot of foolish things, made debts that was stupid, that I had to pay for in my adult years, and even to really today, because I would be so much further ahead financially. Right. So what I did is I said, okay, let me back up with my kids. And so what I did is I incorporated several things. One was we worked together. I worked with my kids, they worked with me. And so we spent a lot of time together, unbeknown to me that I see now. I would not be able to spend that time in any really other thing with as many kids as I have if I had not done something like this. So right. Whatever we did, and so we started when they were young. We began to teach them that money was important. And may I say this, and if you see a flaw in it, it's fine, because I've always been very scared. I did not want money to be a god to them, but money is very important.
Yes.
And so what I did...
It's a tool. Money is a tool, and that's what we have to understand. Money is not a toy. Money is a tool to get to a desired end.
Yeah.
And in the ministry, we have to have it. In life, we have to have it. In business, we have to have it. And so money's not a bad thing, and teaching them that it's not a god, but rather it's a tool to get where you need to go is perfectly fine.
Well, that's what I kind of did, but I took my 4 oldest ones at that time. Again, it'd be 14, probably 13, 14 years ago, and they would get their Christmas money. And I said, here's what you're going to do. You 4 oldest are going to work together. And everything that you do, you're going to keep your money together. And here's why. I had seen in the world that principle worked in business, where people that, and this is horrible to say because most people are so stuck on their self, they can't work with someone. And I've seen people, and the Bible talks about a threefold cord,
right.
And so I put that in. And so my 4 oldest, they bought baby calves, and they bottle-fed baby calves morning and night every day. We did that every day, and they all had their own. And I said, when we sell them, we'll take all of that money, put it together, and we'll do it again. And so that's how we start. I wouldn't suggest you do that. You got to be crazy. But I was trying. It was, and this is what my motto was: if they will walk around in ankle-deep cow manure to feed a calf, they'll just about do any kind of job. They're not. My boys are not scared of most work. They can lay down and go to sleep by any of it. But anyway, no. But I just felt like that's how it was. I mean, when it was cold, they bottle-fed calves. When it was hot, they bottle-fed calves. When it was raining, they bottle-fed calves. And that may sound weird to people, but it was a process. Well, in that process, and this is kind of funny stories that we talk about, some of the calves died. And so we were riding up the driveway one day, and one of my boys was crying, and he said, my calf is the one living, and we're going to sell it, and all of them are going to get part of my calf, and theirs all died. And so I'm driving up the driveway, and I said, guys, this is not the kind of partner we want in business. So I say today we buy him out. And let's get him out. He was probably at that time 8 or 9 years old. He began to weep. He said, no, I don't want to get out. But that was a principle I was trying to teach him. When it's good, praise God. When it's bad, this is how you do it. So we had a motto at our house, and it's been this way. You'll see it on some of my boys' phones. Love God, work hard, and be honest. That was the 3 things that I told them. And so we started it like that. And we would take their Christmas money and let them do that. And they began to value what they did. And it took years. Of course, Philip is 22 now. But it took years to get him where he is. But I personally, I'm not saying I did it all right. There's a lot of things that I didn't do right, but there was a principle here that I was trying to teach them, I think, was right.
So how many head of cattle did y'all finally get up to? The most head of cattle you had at one time?
We have... At one time, we were actually feeding for another guy, and we probably had 400 at one time with his. We actually, we vary between probably 125 to 200 head all the time.
Right.
And here's the thing, we don't buy the top end.
Right.
We buy the stuff that people don't want. Right. We upgrade them, and we sell them. And that's what we've done. It is not, and this is the truth, it is not for making money. And this is a statement that I've made for years. If the day that I get done with my kids, if I owe $150,000 on cows, I will gladly pay it off for what it taught my kids. And
Absolutely.
I mean that.
Absolutely. This is about what the Apostle Paul said about bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, as well as what Solomon said about training them up in the way they should go. Those verses are more than just spiritual. They also deal with the carnal aspect of life in making men, and for the ladies, making ladies out of them for the glory of God and for the good of their own self in the future. So you've had other business ventures in farming. You did chickens for a long time.
Yeah.
And did fairly decent with chickens. And then now the boys have graduated from, hey, we can do this with cows, we can do it with dogs. And they've done well with dogs.
The dog business it ain't the cow business. It's a whole different league. And it's amazing how steps work. And we talk about this often. We would have never gotten in the dog business if we'd not been in the cow business. What they learned to do opened doors that opened us into that, and they do very well today in it. They started buying registered dogs probably, I don't even know, probably 5 years ago now. I don't even know the amount that they have now. But again, you've got 4 boys that all of them own their own together, that it is a together business. Right. So if they sell something, they have an account where it all goes. And now that they've gotten older, matter of fact, I guess it was October, we bought 2 houses. I'm always in it. But it's me and my 4 oldest boys. And the goal is, I don't know, we'll reach the goal. The goal is to pay them off in 3 years. And one of them's already rented. And we do the work on our own stuff mostly.
So are you renting or flipping?
We rent.
We
hardly, and the reason why, not that I'm against flipping, I could make a lot of money flipping them, but in our area, because real estate has gotten so high, if you flip it, you're not going to get one. I mean, people call me about houses that I have wanting to buy them, to flip them, that I've got that I want to keep, just because you can't find them.
Right.
So that's kind of the thought of why, it's just stepped up and up and up. And of course, with 9 kids, now I've got my smaller end coming. Now their potential is even greater than the first ones, because they don't have to hit as many flat spots in the road as my older boys did. They're being able to come right along with them and be able to do it as young people.
Right, because there's a knowledge and a foundation in the business that's been laid down already.
Exactly.
And you've worked through the bugs.
Right, and it's not perfect, and we don't have, the thing that people get in their mind is, well, you have lots of money. I do not have lots of money. My mindset is, I want to invest everything that I have, and that's what I try to teach my kids. And when I say that, obviously giving is a big portion for my family.
Well, let's do this. If you have time, we're nearing the end of our podcast. Can you stay on for one more episode?
Yes.
And because I want to talk about the giving aspect,
okay,
which is huge to me, and we'll talk about our children in regard to the business ventures that they have and the things that they're doing, and kind of give some dads some hope and direction on some places they can begin to formulate work ethic in their children.
Okay.
Let's do that. Hey, listen, thank y'all for joining us today. We're appreciative of the fact that you come by. So, hey, you stay tuned. Next week, there'll be part 2 with Brother David in regard to our children. And I hope this has been a blessing to you and from us to you. As always, you keep pressing on the upward way. We'll see you next week.